Oh my God, I'm a radical skeptic. How can you guys call me a radical skeptic? I mean, you got a little adjective, radical, in front of the word skeptic. You must think all skeptics are radical, huh? You just project this into that. Because how are you going to call me a radical skeptic? Oh, Pyrrho, it's because you deny knowledge. You deny all knowledge. I'm like, well, no, I just deny the knowledge that you say you're absolutely certain and correct about. I mean, you can't be absolutely certain and correct. And, well, but knowledge is those things about which we're absolutely certain and correct. So there's no knowledge left over. You've denied it all. Right, except for this little body of knowledge called scientific knowledge. See, all the scientific knowledge meets the skeptical criteria. So I'm stuck with nothing but scientific knowledge. Oh, well, I'm willing to handle that. All right, this calls for straight from the bottle. Straight. And it ain't the first swig. I rehearsed this shit. I didn't really. Still, the part about it not being the first swig is true. Call it a drunken philosophy if you'd like. I don't care. That's fine. If I can philosophize better in a drunken state than you can sober, I'm fine with that. So we're going to use two references here talking about radical skepticism. They're radical, crazy skeptics. One of them is this thing that was sent to me by To Be Serious, and to be very fair, she said, it wasn't that great. It was a quick Google search. And then the other one is going to be the Outlines of Pyrrhonism, the actual book that records Pyrrhonism, the first and oldest source. It's not from Pyrrho, it's from a guy named Sextus Empiricus, who, I'll let you see the irony and beauty of this fact, is also the man behind much that we know about the Epicureans and the Stoics, both of whom were dogmatists that he entirely disagreed with, but he was able to represent their thoughts more or less as a Stoic or an Epicurean would. How was he able to do that? Fucking amazing. See a dogmatist do that. Oh, because you know what? Yeah, dogmatists don't do so well representing skeptical ideas. It's always just radical empiricism. It makes no sense. So yeah, this article that's not that great, it's still typical because we have thousands of years of skeptics are idiots. Let's ignore their argument, but I'll talk really quickly about why we're going to ignore it. The state of skepticism in philosophy is similar to the state of, say, Nietzsche in American philosophy for quite a number of, several decades, quite a number of years, in which he was thought to be, well, he's just a Nazi. That guy's a Nazi. He wrote specifically against German anti-Semitism, had a famous falling out with Wagner, the composer, over these issues. And people say, oh, he's kind of Nazi and he believes in domination. He's pro-Nazi. Yet he specifically wrote, anti-Nazi. But there were no Nazis then, but he wrote against Wagner's little dalliances with proto-Nazism at the Bayreuth Circle. You can look that up if you like. Oh, I got a phone call. Hold on. Okay, two references. This first one is, let's see. I'll try to remember to put the link down. It's from evans-experimentalism.freewebspace.com. Pyrrhonian with no H, skepticism.html. Yeah. Oddly enough, Pyrrhonian would usually be Pyrrhonistic, but, it's funny, too, because the Outlines of Pyrrhonism uses the term Pyrrhonian. Excellent, but there is an H. And I just found some translation of the Outlines of Skepticism online. I don't know that it's a good translation. I have to check with my other translation. The one I'm going to tell you about a bit later, if I decide to make the video that I think I might make. Okay. Pyrrhonian, parentheses, radical skepticism with the C. That's a legal spelling. By a man named Gary C. Moore, February 2004. I don't know who Mr. Moore is, but I don't think he's read the Outlines of Pyrrhonism. So let me just tell you, the Outlines of Pyrrhonism is by Sextus Empiricus, and it's the oldest writings that we know about Pyrrho. And, it's interesting, because Sextus also is the guy that wrote about the Stoics and the Epicureans. A lot of that, what we know about the Stoics and the Epicureans are from him, which is interesting, because they're dogmatists, and he was diametrically opposed to their philosophy. But he was still fair-minded enough to go ahead and write down their philosophy in a way that they could agree with. Yeah, interesting. I wonder why a skeptic was able to do that. Because the dogmatists don't do so well when they write about skepticism as he did writing about dogmatism. So let's look a little bit at what Gary C. Moore has to say. Okay, so let's just go through this, shall we? Now, he calls the tradition extreme rationality, and hence radical skepticism. Radical, totally radical. Denies everything but scientific knowledge. Okay. Which wholly drops the tradition of as having any truth value. Well, yeah, tradition doesn't have a truth value, and truth value is a bad tradition. So, okay, fine, whatever. The result of this, he says, of dropping tradition and certainty, is literal nihilism. Well, you know what? Any philosopher wants to talk about philosophy needs to know the difference between academic skepticism and Pyrrhonistic skepticism. Pyrrho was the original skeptic in the West, at least. And academic skepticism is the skepticism that developed at Plato's Academy, subsequent to his demise and exit. And it's a very important distinction because, you see, the academic skeptics thought that, well, the only thing we know is that nothing is known. And that's literal nihilism. So-called radical skepticism is nihilism, I agree. But what makes me radical? That's the question. Yeah, because Pyrrho didn't believe that. I'll get into that in a second when we go into the outlines of Pyrrhonism. Shall I? Let's continue. He did not read Pyrrho, obviously, because we will see in a moment. Now he says, although everything is permitted, by pure reason alone, through radical skepticism, you destroyed all motivation. Yeah, we have no reason to want to eat and drink and be merry if we can't be absolutely certain that that's what we should do. You know, I don't have to be absolutely certain in order to know that I'd like to go to a party. He's different, I guess. But he says it's dependent on emotional motivation. And even stupid animals have a better kind of reason than that that's more practical. As if requiring truth to be objectively certain is just oh so practical. I mean, the fact that no truth is objectively certain, certainly no synthetic truth, no truth about the world, is absolutely certain. It's more practical to believe that it is. Because why would you act if you couldn't be absolutely certain? I don't know, maybe you're not an egotistical, fuckhead, and you don't need to be absolutely certain in order to state your opinion and act on it. I don't know. That's kind of how I think. And then the rest is stuff about Hume. And why Hume, who's more of an academic skeptic than a real skeptic in my book, how he came to believe in God and whatnot and so forth and so on, and yeah. Okay. Let's move on to the outlines of Pyrrhonism by... I'll try to make it. I don't have the link here. I forgot the link, but I should be able to find it. I think there's one main copy of a public, domain translation. Chapter 7 and 8 is what I plan to refer to. It says, when we say that the skeptic refrains from dogmatizing, we do not use the term dogma, as some do, in the broader sense of approval of a thing. For the skeptic gives assent to the feelings, plural, which are the necessary result of sense impressions. And he would not, for example, say when feeling hot or cold, I believe that I am not hot or cold. But we say he does not dogmatize, using dogma in the sense which some give it of assent to one of the non-evident objects of scientific inquiry. For example, 150 years ago, thinking that tiny little atoms are like little BBs. Are they really like that, or are they just behaving like that? And consider, now in modern science, we have them acting like BBs in one model, waves in another. And if we give metaphysical truth to either of those models, the other model is contradicted and cannot be given metaphysical truth. Really only the skeptic has a way to believe in both of these at once, waiting as he does for further information to discriminate between the two. Continuing, for the Pyrrhonian philosopher assents to nothing that is non-evident. Nothing that is non-evident. So he assents to the evident, but not to the non-evident.